Good morning. Good morning. This is Biniam on the Checkin In podcast. Welcome to today's episode. We are on episode number 97 as we continue to progress our way towards 100 episodes. Yay. I like looking at those markers along the way and reflecting and being grateful. Ali, good morning. How are you, my friend? Hello, friends. I see you, Natasha and George. Hello on the TikTok as well. Good to have you all joining in. Happy Tuesday to you. As I said before, this is the Checkin In podcast, the podcast where we hopefully recalibrate the past so that we can rewrite more promising futures. We do this by getting to know ourselves much better. There's three key pillars on this podcast: awareness, kindness, and happiness. These are three pillars that I like coming back to on a daily basis that serve me well. And as I reflect on them, I experience a refocus. And I like doing this refocus at the outset of the day, at the beginning of the day. The awareness piece, getting to know ourselves better. You know, something that's interesting when I interact with people, something that really interests and fascinates me is how they grow to be more aware of themselves. I love when I hear people saying in the midst of talking, I never knew that about myself, or this is like something brand new. Hello, good morning. And so, yeah, the awareness piece is a pretty critical starting place, I would say, in getting to be better versions of ourselves. Second piece is the kindness piece, learning how to apply kindness to ourselves because we are worthwhile and because we've been taught how not to do it, but to rip ourselves apart in the midst of life in general. And then finally, the happiness piece is a way of acknowledging and saying, hey, there are so many emotions that we usually bypass because we haven't had that help in learning how to experience them and process them, but they're still legitimate and good. So those emotions, the whole variety, are necessary and important. And how can we experience all of them as we make space for happiness? So those are the three key pillars on the Checkin In podcast. Again, welcome to episode number 97. What I usually do on these podcasts is I look at self-reflection questions. I analyze a question and look at why it's worthwhile. I find it really helpful to do so because in so doing is how we are able to get the maximum benefit from our responses to the said question. Today's question we are answering is an interesting one. It asks, how can you nurture your relationships this week, this month, or this year? How can you nurture those relationships in your life, the variety of them? So we'll look at that question, we'll tackle it, and we'll consider how we can grow a little richer in our experience of life as we reflect on those social connections that mean a lot to us, those relationships that are meaningful. It reminds me again that this life isn't made to be lived solo, right? We aren't. Hello, good morning. How are you? This is the Checkin In podcast. Welcome. We are addressing the question today: how can you nurture your relationships this week, month, or year? Podcast. It's designed to help me primarily, but also you by extension in how to get to be better versions of us. Something we don't just kind of ambiguously walk through, but something I think that requires intention. And so, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, yes, the life that we all live, I don't think was meant to be solo. I don't think it was meant to be in isolation. And yet, from my observation, so many of us, myself included, once upon a time, were in this zone where we felt disconnected in significant ways. We felt set apart. We felt like we were on the outside, even if we were in the midst of community. There was just that sense that you wish that there was a way that people could see you or acknowledge your existence or appreciate your investments or input or contributions. And for most of us, I think we have learned to sort of disconnect in some way because it is really vulnerable to open up and let other people in. It's really vulnerable and risky to let others into your life in such a way where they're coming alongside and walking beside you. That's a scary thing to, yeah, that's a scary thing. So, in that setting, in that setting where we say the alternative is to protect, to scale back, to not open up as much just for safety or survival sake, we sort of back away and we don't invest the way that we could or we would like to. Again, because it's driven primarily by fear of getting hurt again, fear of being depleted or like diminished because that's what's happened in the past, right? And so I get that because I've been there. I have experienced what that looks like. So yeah, there's no judgment here. I totally understand that setting, but it still doesn't change the point that I think we were made to be in community. We were made to be in amongst others who can come alongside and encourage us along our way. Um, And I would suggest it's just a process of learning how to do so, how to learn to be open in appropriate ways, how to learn to express vulnerability, how to learn to extend oneself to be able to say, how can how can I make this work in my favor? Right. So what does that look like? And today's question answers that. Today's question answers that. It presumes that there are connections in your life that are important, connections or relationships that you have found tremendous value in, and you want to continue to see growing and evolving. How can you nurture? Nurture is a good word. When I think of the word nurture, I think of the word care. How can you care for your relationships this week? Don't they just happen though? Someone might ask. Don't you just kind of go with the flow, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and if it's supposed to be, it should be flawless and it should be effortless. I think that's not true. I don't think that's something worthwhile investing in by way of a perspective because let me give you an analogy. I think following analogies. Most of you know that I'm an Uber driver. And if I were to apply that same logic to my vehicle, saying, hey, when I got this vehicle, it works supremely fine. I don't have to do any care to it. It's just going to continue to serve me. I don't have to check the gauges that are there to give me information on how the vehicle is doing and how it's communicating its needs. I don't have to worry about any of that. If I were to neglect all that and say, I don't need to care or nurture my vehicle, I don't have to clean it. I don't have to maintain it. I don't have to fine tune components. I don't have to enhance its performance. I don't have to do any of that. What tends to happen is it's going to start spiraling downwards. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to run out of gas if I don't check the gas gauge, right? So most of us are like, at least I'll check the gas gauge because I want to get to where I want to go. And so we know that that's a necessary component. But then we may neglect checking the oil on the engine. And if we neglect checking the oil, that's some serious trouble, especially if there are some warning signs that pop up on our gauge saying, "Hey, you need to attend to this. This is needing some attention." And if you neglect that, you're heading towards a catastrophic ending for your vehicle and what it's supposed to be doing for you. If you neglect the cleanliness of the vehicle, if I just didn't even bother cleaning my vehicle and people kept coming in and out, please consider teaching yoga. Great insights. I appreciate that. Thank you. um, love your voice. I appreciate that. Thanks for the encouragement, friends. So, if you are not cleaning the vehicle, as people come in and out, as they make messes and those kind of things, it's not going to clean up itself, right? And so that's going to be a problem. And so, in some sense, nurture and care is part of life, isn't it? Your home, your room, for example, all these things take an investment of energy, and they do so because, in the absence of doing so, dust is going to settle. Things are gonna smell like even me this morning. I had to. You may not notice, but I had a shower. I look good and fresh, and I shaved. Oh, I shaved my cheekbones at least. But yes, looked. I look presentable. I changed my clothes because that's what is necessary to nurture and care for ourselves. So these are really key, important components. But why would we not do that to those social connections that we really want to see growing and thriving in our life? Why would we then think that the connections we make are are self-running, right? That they don't need that kind of attention. That's a bit of a problem. That's a significant problem, I would suggest. There is this perspective out there today that you don't have to work on these things because if it was meant to be, it's going to be it's going to be like fluid and easy, and you're just going to mesh really well. That's the perspective that some have in relationships. It shouldn't have to be trouble or work hard because if it's meant to be, you're just going to get each other, right? Or same thing in friendships. I don't think that's true because we're such diverse people. We're so different. We're so different in the way that we think, in the way that we process, in the way we communicate, in the way that we value things. And so, if we're not talking about these differences and how they can coalesce and work really well together, if we're not talking and addressing those, then what tends to happen is we start to butt heads and then things kind of fall apart. So, it takes communication, right, to be able to say, hey, what does this look like? And so, nurturing or caring for friendships is really important. If you've never thought of this, I think it's a really important episode today for you to be a part of. A really important episode because as you're listening in, I want you to be thinking about those relationships in your sphere, those connections that are really important to you, and how you want to continue to make sure that they're doing well. What kind of care and nurture is going to be necessary for you to take these connections that you really find important and take them to the next level and continue to make sure they're fine-tuned and well. It doesn't happen by chance. It happens because you're intentionally thinking about and planning for it. One of the ways people do that is they consider important dates, for example, important dates like your birthday or your anniversary or some other important date, and they try to remember. And when they remember someone's important date and then they acknowledge that date and then they celebrate or appropriately acknowledge that date to this individual, that individual feels cared for because you thought about them. That didn't happen by accident where you're like, oh, I guess, it was that day a few months ago and I totally missed it, no, it happens much better when you are able to convey and say, hey, this is important to you. And I want to acknowledge its existence and what this means for you. And this is my way of saying, you take up real estate in my mind, you take up space in my head. And I'm happy for that. I'm happy that you take up space. And I want to make sure that this connection that we have, this relationship, is one that continues to serve us in helpful ways. It's a vulnerable thing, friends. It's a vulnerable thing to stick yourself out there and say, I have an interest in you and I want to nurture what we have, right? Relationships. How many of you have been in relationships long term where neglect has sustained that relationship? It doesn't happen, does it? Even for no reason at all. One partner likes the other one to do things for them that they really appreciate and enjoy that they know about, right? She may, for example, if she enjoys cooking, make a meal, right? That is her partner's favorite meal. That's a show or display of nurture and care, saying, hey, I went out of my way to do this. The one side may say, hey, I spontaneously went and booked a trip for us, just for the two of us, so that we could have time together. What an amazing display again there of care and nurture, right? That's amazing. So we are, I was arguing, made to be in community. It's scary to be in community, so we sort of push everyone away, figuratively speaking. We push those around us away because we don't want to get hurt like we once have been. And so we learn how to become lone rangers. And that's such a sad existence in my perspective because you don't have the thing that you long for, I'm guessing, most, and that is to feel that space where you can be safe, where someone can know you for who you are, and they can acknowledge your you-ness and say, I'm glad that I'm getting to know you as you are instead of as the choreographed version that I want you to be, right? Really important. And so, yes, all that's to say, we need to nurture our relationships. Really important question. And if you haven't thought about this for a while, what does that look like for you, even as you're listening into this podcast uh, at this moment? What does it look like for you to be intentional about nurturing those relationships? For those of you who are parents, what does it look like for you to convey and communicate to your young ones that they're important. How can you communicate that? You may think they already know that. Look at all I do for them. But if we don't actually do things and say things saying, I wanted to do this because you're important, I wonder if sometimes we just miss those connections. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's an important thing. How can you convey and communicate to those who are close and dear to you? You mean a lot to me, and this is my way of communicating what you mean to me. I wanted to do this. That's amazing. What does it look like for you to nurture your friendships? Those that really mean a lot to you. How can you go out of your way, inconvenience yourself, and say, hey, this is really important to me. And I wanted to express it this way. I wanted to nurture it this way, whether it's by giving them time, whether it's by making something for them by way of a gift. Maybe it is something in the sphere of serving them in some capacity. Maybe it is in some way the kind of things you can say to this individual, right? Or maybe it's just listening, right? Making yourself available, giving them the gift of time. If you don't know, these five things that I just mentioned are straight out of the playbook of the five love languages, the five love languages that give us a way of understanding how to serve others who are important in our lives. Really important, very important, right? So, we need to nurture relationships. And if we can do so, not every once in a blue moon, but if we can look for opportunities to do so on a regular basis, this serves us in some significant ways. One, it deepens that connection, it deepens it, it makes it more intentional. They feel a lot more cared for. And we feel that we're accomplishing our end of saying, I want to make sure this continues to get sweet and amazing. That's a beautiful thing when you can be in those kind of a context, those kind of contexts where it is so amazing that way. Do you know what I'm saying? That's really worthwhile. And so, what does that look like to be able to experience what that looks like? Nice bow tie. Appreciate it. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. So, yes. And then, the more we do it, the more it also sets a pattern for what care looks like in a way that we're not haphazard about it, but we're like, hey, just like I remember telling those people that I love them, or just like I remember to brush my teeth before I go to bed, or just like I make sure I put gas in the car. This is one of those things I need to make sure these connections that I experience in life are worthwhile and impacting. So critical, so critical. So, friends, let me gift you that this morning, this episode. Let me gift you that encouragement to say, how can you create and cultivate those experiences where you're feeling how deep things are going in a good way. How's the business going? Asks Wilkins. Wilkins, the business actually did a face flop. As best as I was able to apply myself, it just didn't fly the way I'd hoped and anticipated. So now I'm not quitting. I'm not quitting. I'm still keeping on going, pursuing it. Hence why I'm still doing the podcast here, but I'm just going to scale back a little bit while I take on some jobs and sort of recalibrate financially and regroup. So that's what I'm doing. I've got some fantastic ideas that I want to float and still pursue and serve you guys. But I just needed to take a break for a moment so that I could survive financially and economically. So that's what's happening with the business. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Rome wasn't built in a day. You're so right. And I was just listening to another podcast too, where they were saying something similar and saying, yeah, failure is an important component. Failure is an important lesson. And yes, I agree. It wasn't fun. It was very discouraging. And yet, here I am, not down for the count. I'm still in the game. And so I have some ambitious goals that I'm still pursuing. But if anything, it's to serve you guys, to help you guys feel something wonderful as a result of my contributions. Thank you for asking, though. I super appreciate that. I'm going to keep on going. Very random, but are you a Spider Man fan? If so, are you looking forward to the trailer drop? I'm sure I'd enjoy it. I haven't seen them, though. I haven't had time to see them. So I guess there's a new one coming out. Is that right? I haven't seen it yet. I would be open to seeing it. Um, But I wonder, do I need to see the previous ones first to have this one make sense, or can I just jump in without seeing all the previous ones? Not that I wouldn't mind seeing the other ones too, right? I would totally love to, but I'm not sure. Yeah. So, friends, again, this is episode number 97. We are approaching the 100th episode where I want to do something super special. And so that's going to be amazing. That's a big threshold I'm crossing into the three digits for episodes. And I'm so thrilled. That's like 100 episodes, half an hour each or so. Holy crap. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. That's like 50 hours. That's 50 hours worth of content that I've been talking about, right? I've had 50 hours worth of saying stuff. I guess I'm pretty opinionated and I know that, but that's still something worthwhile celebrating. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up, I think, later this week on Friday, most likely. And so if you have some ideas of how we can celebrate, I would love to hear them. Love to hear them. So for some reason, on my Instagram, the comments haven't been showing up for a while, and I'm not sure exactly why. I'll try to do some checking and see. But if you're trying to communicate, I apologize that I'm not seeing any of the feedback on the Instagram. But that's what's going on. Yes. So oh my goodness, look at the time. Oh, let me jump into my response. So I was saying, how can you nurture your relationships? It's important to nurture relationships on an intentional basis, consistently, regularly. Oh, so important, so important. Here are some of my suggestions that I'm throwing out for myself, but hopefully they serve you as well. Number one, I want to nurture my relationships by being intentional. I don't want it to be like oh, I should have done this. I want it to be like, hey, who are people in my life that I want to reach out to and say, thank you for being you. Thank you for being a part of my life. Thank you for the way you invest. Thank you for the ways you encourage me. How can I nurture them by intentionally reaching out to them and saying, hey, you were on my mind for X, Y, and Z reasons? Number one, I want to actually reach out to them with intention. I want to be intentional about that. And I mentioned this a few times over because it's that important where you're planning it beforehand. For example, when you're hungry, you say, I'm going to make intention to put some food in my belly, right? You don't just sit around saying, I hope something happens. No, you're like, I'm going to go looking in the fridge. I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to go and ask for something that I need, right? And so, how can you, in the same way, do that with those relationships in your life that are really important? Be intentional, number one. Intention is really powerful. Intention shows that this was worth your while. It wasn't by accident. When the receiving party sees the intentionality, they are super encouraged. Does that make sense? They're like, wow, you went out of your way to intentionally put together this beautiful piece of artwork. That didn't happen in moments. You had intention. You set time apart for this. And I super appreciate that. That conveys a deeper sense of nurture and care. It's really powerful. Can I say that? So for me, I would say I want to be more intentional. I want to be more intentional when I reach out to someone and say, "Hey, I just want you to know, thank you for the way that you are serving me in this way, investing in me, encouraging me, whatever they're doing." I, that intention is really important. And as you express that intention, do it in meaningful ways. Meaningful ways. And what I mean by this is based on how well you know this individual that you want to nurture that connection with, what is it that's going to serve them well? For example, if I have a guy friend and he is, let's say he's really into, right, he's really into doing stuff together. He loves quality time together, but I'm never available, right? I'm never available because I don't make myself available to spend time with him. But that's the thing that I know he really needs. But if I'm giving him something else by way of care, let's say I am serving him, I'm mowing his lawn for him, or I'm doing stuff for him, right? And he's like, well, that's nice, but it didn't really hit the spot. I'm missing an opportunity here. I'm doing stuff for him. Yes, I'm showing care, but it's not the kind of care that is landing, right? I'm just missing that opportunity. He's needing this quality time with me, but I'm unavailable because I'm doing all this other stuff for him. So I'm super busy. And so the way I'm serving him and caring for him misses the connection point instead of connecting with him, right? If I know this individual well enough and that I know that that's what he needs, that's what I want to do. I want to do it in such a way. Uh, I want to do it in such a way where uh, th- the way that I'm attending to him is meeting his needs, right? So if I know he needs quality time, I'm not going to do all this other stuff. I'm going to intentionally make myself available to spend time with him because I know that's what is nurturing him. Does that make sense? So know as well as you can this individual and what it is that means a lot to them. Maybe they appreciate receiving gifts over quality time. So, what can you do by way of making small gifts that are meaningful and show care? And that can convey nurture to this individual. So, number one, intentionality, taking the time out to do it and being on purpose when you do it, like doing it on purpose, making plans to do it. That's important. Number two, knowing them well enough to know what it is that you're going to serve them well with. How well do you know them and what is it good that's going to serve their needs, right? That's really critical. That's going to deepen that connection. Number three, in whatever way, communicating. In the absence of communicating, it's almost like it's almost like uh when you're waiting for something to happen and you just can't wait for the outcome because it's going to be so good, but then when the outcome comes, it actually it's really disappointing. Kind of like, if you will, if you've watched Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, it was a very popular series for such a long time, And at the end of it, the final season, it was like one of those moments that people were looking forward to, and they're like, I can't wait. And then when the eighth season came out, it was very disappointing, extremely disappointing, right? That's what it's like when you don't communicate. You are shortchanging yourself on that connection. It's not going to arrive at the destination. If you don't communicate and say, hey, you were on my mind, and I want you to know that this is what I did intentionally to care and nurture this relationship that we have. If you don't do that, then they never know, right? You may have a whole bunch of really good feelings, and you may be intentional about these things that you think of about this individual, which are really encouraging. But if you never actually communicate it, if you never put words to it, if you never intentionally go out and say to them, "Hey, by the way, I want you to hear this. This is important for me. I made this for you," or I want to spend time with you. If you never express those intentions, it never arrives at the destination, and they're not as encouraged. They don't feel as nurtured, right? And that relationship that doesn't get deeper. So that's a really important component, I would say, in all of this. That final component is critical. So be intentional, know them well enough to know what it is that's going to serve them well, and then communicate it. Communicate it, because in the absence of communication, they're not mind readers. They won't understand what you meant to them. And they may still go their way with some sense of discouragement or whatever place they're at. But we're talking today about how to deepen that relationship, and it doesn't happen in the absence of communication. For many of us, we struggle with communication. We struggle with communication because it's like, oh, I don't know if I can extend myself and communicate this kind of care and concern that is important. And it's out of your, it doesn't feel natural, right? It's important. It's important, if I can just say, because when you don't do it, you miss opportunities. Missed opportunities in relationships do not nurture relationships. They, in fact, detract from relationships where that individual thinks, I guess I'm not that important, because you never communicated that they were important to you, right? And so that's really important. I'm hearing that BC is flooding and it's crazy. I do not know that. I haven't been listening to the news for a while, so I'm so sorry. Is that where you're at, by the way, aviation? That sounds really critical. I hope things go well for you guys over there. That's really, I'm sorry that that's the case. Oh, shucks. One of the ways that I want to nurture my connection with you, my listeners, my watchers, my followers, let me tell you how I follow through here. Number one, I'm intentional. I'm here like every weekday around the same time to serve you guys, right? This is important for me, and I want to convey that care for you guys. I want to care. I want to nurture it by saying, how can I make myself available by being here, right? I want to. I want to be intentional about this. Number two, I want to serve you in ways that I think are going to help you. How can I share my insights and my experiences so that you guys can also feel that on your end? That's important for me. Number three, I also want to communicate it. I'm talking to you guys. I'm expressing and sharing with you guys. So just in case you're wondering, I want to nurture this connection with you guys for the long term. Thanks for being part of this podcast, friends. I will be back again tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday. Love you.